Hi, everyone. If you are here for the presentation on inclusion, a global perspective to empower educators to serve marginalized students. I'm Rose Dumond, and I am the coordinator of special education for our secondary programs in the Santa Clara Unified School District. And my co-presenter today is Namita Monter.
Hi, Rose. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Namita Monder. I'm a program specialist with Santa Clara Unified School District. I will be talking more about what we are doing. In my current position, I am overseeing programs in preschool and elementary and working very closely with Inclusion Collaborative in creating inclusive opportunities at Santa Clara Unified School District. So welcome everyone. We also have global partners for this presentation, and I am very delighted to have our third panelist, to introduce our third panelist. It's Dr. Sarika Khurana. She's a good friend of mine, a speech language pathologist who's working as Deputy Director Clinical at Dr. S.R. Chandrasekhar Institute of Speech and Hearing, Bangalore. And you will hear more about her work as we go through the presentation and share our global partners' work.
And our second global partner is Our second global partner is Mai Roble, who is currently Executive Director of the Teachers Gallery in the Philippines. She's also a partner with the Inclusion Initiative. And what we've done today is we'll have a presentation for you as well as interviews with our two global partners. And just a funny story, we had incredible challenges with the time zones for India and the United States and the Philippines. So we have pre-recorded these interviews, but I think that you'll get a lot out of the information that they'll be presenting today on our topic. So today we're going to be talking about marginalization and serving all students, the conditions affecting inclusion, a global understanding of inclusion implementation across the globe, and particularly in India and the Philippines. And then at the end, we will be providing resources from both of our partners. Our presentation objectives today. Our presentation objectives today are at the end of the session that participants will be able to understand the definition of marginalized students in a global context.
At the end of the session, participants will be exposed to the different challenges educators face to improve inclusive practices from an international perspective.
And then participants will also be able to reflect on and enhance their mindset on inclusive practices in their classrooms and work environments. First, we're going to start with a definition of marginalization, and from the Bellwether Educational Partners 2020 report, this just recently came out in their research on students who are going missing in the United States during the pandemic. But marginalized students include children in foster care, students experiencing homelessness, students with disabilities, English language learners, and migrant students. And if you think about it, these are all of the kids that we deal with every single day and are actually the most needy and marginalized in our schools and coming out of the pandemic. We also have some terms as far as marginalization and describing the conditions under which students are really struggling to attend school and why they may be at home or homeless. English learners and students with disabilities have no good options to receive the educational accommodations and services that they are legally entitled to. Children in foster care and children experiencing homelessness encounter barriers to education before the pandemic, and they continue to have issues with instability, confusion, and poor communication. And then there are young people who have transitioned to work and are not attending school at all because they are helping their families with providing care and then learning support. And the pandemic has also isolated children and youth experiencing abuse and neglect. There are many who are at home who haven't returned, and the fear is that there are conditions in the home that are preventing them from coming, which we probably don't want to know, but need to report. Teachers and staff at schools have always been the first responders to support these students, but many now are no longer in our schools. And so there's a fear that there are bad things happening for our students out in the communities.
The main three pillars by which we are going to further discuss how marginalization affects inclusion work in the global community are policies, attitudes, and systems.
So to this end, we want to give a definition of policies, which means the effects of implementation of supports from a national, regional, and local legislation that support inclusion, the legislative policies that support expectations, but how those expectations are carried out varies across the globe, as well as here within the United States. Some examples of policies include the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and also the United Nations Article 24.
And of course, we know that attitude definitely affects our work in inclusion. Attitudes are conditioned that will inspect societal and personal influences on achieving an inclusive mindset and where these countries currently have opportunities and challenges. We know that pandemic brought about an extra layer of difficulties that many of our global partners will discuss with you today. But having that right attitude to support really brings a change in our approach to inclusion.
Then lastly, the third condition that we'll be looking at is the systemic support condition, which looks at each country's ability to implement an inclusive culture. So not only do the policies drive mandates and recommendations through those policies, and the attitudes that we have about accepting students with different kinds of backgrounds that they bring to us every day. The systemic support condition is about how a country or a school system is able to implement all of those things given the attitudes and the policies that were given. Again, this is a slide regarding the conditions within the United States. So again, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the United Nations Article 24, which is a really interesting article. That is a global policy that came out of the United Nations recommending, actually strongly mandating, inclusive education. And then in terms of the attitudes, we always have to look at the 4 areas: exclusion, segregation, integration, and inclusion. Our guest speaker here at the conference, Shelley Moore, speaks to this often. And I use her work very often in speaking with teachers and discussing an inclusive mindset. But these are all of the different kinds of conditions that continue to exist in our communities locally, nationally, but also across the globe. And so always looking at those attitudes of where we're coming from and how we're addressing the needs of students. And then in terms of systems, definitely here in the United States, we have a general education system and a special education system that supports general education. However, those 2 systems are looked at as 2 separate and different silos. And what needs to happen for a fully inclusive mindset is that we bridge that gap and bring those 2 things together and making good connections to serve all kids. This is just one of our last slides that explains exclusion, segregation, integration, and inclusion. I'll let you read through this again, but good definitions and a good visual in terms of the conditions of these mindsets and attitudes of how we bring kids into inclusive environments, but also to reflect on what is happening in special education. I'm sorry to say that we segregate kids, and what we need to do is to have a more inclusive environments, like in the bottom tier here. We do a really good job of integration, but true inclusion is where we need to get to. And one of our partners, of course, here at the conference, our Inclusion Collaborative, is really working hard to make that vision happen. We have a quick video that we would like to share with you, which talks about global inclusion from many different countries before we segue into our next segment. And this is an UNESCO video that came out in 2020.
En este mundo hay una gran diversidad.
La diversidad es la norma, la diferencia es lo que nos hace crecer.
Reconocer que somos diferentes, pero iguales en lo fundamental.
Todos somos iguales.
La educación es el pilar de la transformación social.
Porque es importante la inclusión y la equidad en la educación.
Para generar un ambiente en el cual los estudiantes se sientan aceptados e incluidos.
Our society can become more prosperous, more peaceful, and more sustainable.
The social outcome of the education and the learning outcomes, it's came together.
Sin inclusión y sin equidad no creo que podamos hablar de educación.
Tenemos que pelear por una inclusión que conlleve a la participación en pie de igualdad.
Donde hay inclusión y equidad hay paz, y donde hay paz hay buena educación.
Ahí nacen las raíces y las bases de una sociedad.
It makes the society more fair and more equal and more cohesive and more peaceful way. That's why. No hay una sola forma correcta de enseñar ni de aprender.
Now we'd like to move into our next segment, which is really special, and introduce you to our global partners. The first segment will be with Mai Roble from the Philippines, and the second will be with Dr. Sarika Kurana. And now I want to introduce Mai Roble from the Teachers Gallery in the Philippines, and she's going to be talking about inclusion implementation in that nation. Hi, Mai.
Hi, Ms. Rose. Thank you so much for inviting us. So hi, everyone. I'm Mai Roble, an educator and advocate of inclusive education from the Philippines. So I am currently the executive director of the Teachers Gallery, a social enterprise founded out of our advocacy for inclusive education. And I'm also one of the co-founders of Inclusion Initiative, or INU, a nonprofit organization which aims to work with all stakeholders in co-creating solutions for inclusive education. And this was supported by the UNICEF Philippines and the Asia Foundation.
So what can you tell us about some of the work that you've been doing recently with the Inclusion Initiative?
Sure. Yes, Ms. Rose. So we at Inclusion Initiative believe that we should engage stakeholders in co-creating solutions for inclusive education. So in our next slide, we can see this is our program framework. So I'd like to talk more about this campaign. So our campaign is named the Inclusion Campaign, making inclusion a reality, one district at a time. So these are the important stakeholders we've tapped, which we think will have key roles in making inclusion a reality here. So for our regional forums and seminars, we work closely with LGUs, educators, and legislators. And of course, we need the ordinances and legal support. And we also continue this by engaging them with our inclusive education awareness or advocacy campaigns to be able to come up with a comprehensive inclusive education bill. So as for our leadership program, we focus on three major areas for our pre-service, in-service, and Principal Leadership Institute. So for the pre-service, we've been providing training of travel. We have traveling mentors who teach pre-service teachers. These are those who are still student teachers. So they already have a concept or perception what inclusive education looks like in their classrooms. So for inclusive teacher center, we have the in-service teachers. So we had a pilot, or we call this a boot camp of our inclusive teacher training for teachers. It's a 3-day program, so which we selected teachers. So this teacher will be training. So we selected 50 for this boot camp, and this 50 teachers also trained another set of 50 teachers in their classrooms, in their schools, to assist them in handling diverse learners in their classrooms. So what we also realized was, which was really important, was engaging principals. So through our Inclusive Principal Leadership Institute, for 2 days, we've been training principals on how to develop inclusive schools. These are the tools we need to enhance our curriculum or our schools and classrooms as well.
So really, the policies are driving the initiatives that you can implement through the schools and through the nation. And one of the key elements of what happens in the Philippines in education is that it is a national framework. So it isn't like each region, or like here in the United States, a state might have different types of curriculum or procedures and policies. The entire nation has one policy. And so what is happening with Mai and her group at the Teachers Gallery is they're really affecting change through initiatives and advocacy and then into schools.
Yes, and I just like to share also, Ms. Rose, because it was just recently in 2019 when the Department of Education order came out about the policy guidelines on the K-12 basic education program. And on Annex 5, they included an inclusive education policy framework for basic education. So I just like to share Section 7 states that teachers have the responsibility to implement inclusive education, and they have to possess the proper values, perspectives, attitudes, and competencies. So with that, it's clearly indicated that this order is essential. It has an essential capability in the enhancement and awareness of all the teachers to continuously create an inclusive learning environment that promotes inclusion of all learners.
And that's wonderful. And Maya, I know that you were very instrumental in getting that adopted and implemented within that structure.
But we're doing this a lot with a lot of partners, so it's not just us. It's really a collaboration among all stakeholders, and they played a really essential part in all that we do.
And so here's an example, correct? What can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, so obviously these are events that happened pre-COVID. So on the upper leftmost, we have an international summit on inclusive education where we gathered school leaders, we have legislators, we also invited personalities who promote inclusive education, and leaders of different sectors who we had dialogues with on what they want to have in because we're still working on the inclusive education bill. So that was followed by the activities I mentioned. So these photos are taken during the training of teachers and school leaders. And also on below, we have, we at Teachers Gallery continue to train and equip teachers with the right tools on how, by empowering teachers, we believe that they'll be more confident in their classrooms and how to handle their diverse learners.
So it's really taking off, and some of the things that the Teachers Gallery has been doing is providing some training, even online, to continue to spread the word on inclusion.
Yes, and Miss Rose has always been so great. We're so grateful of her because she's been sharing her time and expertise to us as well here in the Philippines.
So here's some data from your initiative. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so before we had our workshop, Miss Rose, so we started with a pre-test. So we wanted to know where the teachers or participants are at on their familiarity with the policies, on their perceptions on handling learners with disability and other diverse learners. We wanted to know if they had some training. So as we can see, only 43% of teachers had been trained on inclusive education. That's for the in-service, and only 30% for the service training. Yes, so after the workshop, after attending it, there has been a significant increase. So because from having this fear or perception that they're not equipped with handling these learners with disability after the 3-day workshop. So 77% already felt good and thinks that they have very good knowledge to handle their learners. So 73% also think that they already had very good to very good knowledge on the familiarity of the concept of disability. So I'm really happy as well because from 36% there it increased to 73%. This was the level of acceptance. They are now ready to accept learners with disability and diverse learners in their classroom.
And some of the cool things that you've been doing through the Teachers Gallery with some mini online trainings over the last couple of years have been in terms of differentiating some of the work and accepting and being more diverse in terms of their teaching methods. We've done some work around universal design for learning, and
Yes,
also definitely the topic of inclusion and the diversity and the variety of the kinds of students in these classes. So what can you tell us about some of the challenges that occur?
Yes, so we're grateful that we have partners who actually help us, but some of the challenges that we see here is that the Philippine education system lacks funding. So we have shortage of inclusive classroom design. We lack accessible infrastructure in schools so that our learners with disabilities can attend classes. We don't have ramps in classrooms, in washrooms, in playgrounds. Even the public transportation is a bit challenging. So these are the challenges identified by learners with disability. We also noted that attitudinal barriers is one. It's a barrier or a challenge in implementing inclusive education. Maybe because we try to understand our teachers as well. They were just not trained on how to help and give adjustments to learners with disability. Yeah, and yeah, maybe that's it, Miss Rose. And also some parents would because they think that only specialized teachers are equipped to handle their kids with disability. So they'd like to have it on separate classes as well. So with our framework, which stops all the stakeholders, and we explain to them how or somehow we also consult them how they wanted inclusive education to look like. So we've been doing a lot of collaboration with them, consultative meetings as well.
So a lot around the attitudes, changing attitudes, impacting the system, working with policy and advocacy. And what can you tell us a little bit more about the Teachers Gallery and the work that we've been doing together?
Yes, Miss Rose. So we at Teachers Gallery and Inclusion Initiative believe that we have to co-create solutions for inclusive education. So Teachers Gallery offers learning opportunities and tools related to inclusive education to both teachers and the broader education community. So aside from all our trainings and workshops, we also have global learning initiatives, which we had the chance to visit Ms. Rose Dumon's district, and yeah, so in this field, we seek to lead, transform, and serve the students for a better future.
Right. And so this has been a wonderful partnership with the Teachers Gallery and sharing our different practices and having more far-reaching impact to many other global partners. So our next segment will be presented by Namita Monder and Dr. Sarika Khurana, and they will be talking about practices in India.
In this segment, we are going to continue talking with our global partners about inclusive practices around the globe. So what I would like to do is quickly introduce myself and then share my global partners' perspective on inclusion. My name is Namita Monder. I'm a program specialist currently working with Santa Clara Unified School District. My background is that of a speech language pathologist for more than a couple of decades. I'm also an AAC AT specialist. The pandemic gave me an opportunity to start a Facebook page and a YouTube channel called TalkSped. I have a passion to learn more about inclusion and in the global community share disability awareness, which was the sole purpose of this Facebook page, TalkSped. And I've put in a lot of information on there about disability awareness. In my current position as a program specialist, I love to create inclusive opportunities everywhere I work. And currently in my position, I have preschool and elementary sites where we are closely working with Inclusion Collaborative to bring those inclusive opportunities. In this segment, I talk with my friend, Dr. Sarika Khurana, who is a speech language pathologist, currently working in India, but has worked all over the world in PNG, Thailand, and she is very passionate about early intervention and disability awareness. Welcome, Sarika, and tell us more about your current position, what you do, and your work.
Thank you for having me, Namita. Currently, I am the clinical director at the Dr. S.R. Chandrasekhar Institute of Speech and Hearing. I've been in this field for over 25 years. And it is a passion now. I joke about it that I would do it for free. Thankfully, I get paid for it.
Welcome, Sarika. So this is an institute which is a training as well as clinical work, right?
Yes. Dr. S.R. Chandrasekhar Institute of Speech and Hearing offers clinical services as well as training programs for bachelor's, master's, and PhD candidates.
Great. Sarika, tell us a little bit more about inclusive practices in India, given the dynamics and challenges of the width and the breadth of the country.
India has made considerable progress in terms of putting in place robust legal frameworks and a range of provisions and schemes for children with disabilities. And now India is putting in place policies that are ensuring that these services are available at the grassroots level.
Right. I know that policies are extremely critical for any country to make implementation of laws, and also brings in the challenges of implementing these laws, right? So given how India is diverse, what do you think are the outreach of these policies throughout India? How does that play into the inclusion work?
Inclusive education in India is complex to implement. It requires a fine understanding of the diversity of children with disabilities, their families, and the cross-cultural contextual issues involved. And all the policies that have been put in place by the government of India, they are implemented through a body called SSA, that is Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. This body coordinates the efforts of all the departments and ensures that these provisions are available to children all over the country, including the rural areas.
Wow, that is a huge undertaking for sure. And I know that pandemic brought extra layers of challenges for all of us all over the world. We had to quickly move education to a digital world, which, I know that India is far ahead in technology. However, education policies and education, especially those related with children with special needs, is still a work in progress. So how did you handle all this during the crazy time of pandemic?
Yes, thankfully, during the pandemic, the Indian government came up with the new education policy in 2020, and that emphasizes on non-discrimination of children with special needs. They have made provisions for Braille and sign language in schools. Teacher training programs have been emphasized, and of course, providing technology and assistive devices to children with special needs are some of the highlights of this program.
I know that, implementing these policies has been very challenging for not just in India, but, getting the infrastructure, getting these resources out there. The system challenges that we've discussed is critical in ensuring how we can implement some of these things. And pandemic only heightened the gap that we have, between those who can afford these services or where it is accessible, and how many challenges we have when it comes to delivering these services with children with special needs. So let's hear from you some of the inclusive practices, challenges which you faced even now, and also I'm sure pre-pandemic.
Yes, in a developing country like India, where 75% of children with disabilities live in the rural areas, the challenges are immense. Majority of schools face challenges like lack of infrastructure, teachers with not enough training in inclusive education, they don't have access to disability-friendly environments, lack of support staff, and there is a high dropout rate in the rural areas. So providing inclusive education to children at various levels becomes really challenging in India.
Absolutely, Sarika. I think this list can be very long. Let's talk about some of the inclusive practices at your center and that you are aware of in India, and you want to highlight with us for our audience today to see what they are and how you're doing it. Again, sharing it a little bit. Let's talk about pre-pandemic and then maybe what it is like right now. So tell us more about these inclusive practices.
Yes, thanks, Namita, for giving me this opportunity to share some of the things that are happening in India. Since it's a huge country, it's difficult to cover all the programs, but I have picked two organizations and their work in inclusive education. The first one is Dr. S.R. Chandrasekhar Institute of Speech and Hearing. That is where I work. And the other one is APD, that is the Association of Persons with Disabilities. Both these organizations are based in Bangalore. I'll begin with the programs at the Institute. The first very exciting program that we run is a mobile speech and hearing van that goes to the rural areas. It helps in creating awareness, in early identification of children with special needs.
Wonderful. And how often were these mobile vans or buses able to go out to the rural areas? Pre-pandemic, I'm sure post-pandemic it's a halt right now, but how often were you able to make this outreach happen?
Before the pandemic hit, the van would go out once or twice a week. And of course, the pandemic changed that, but we did turn towards online training and online assessment programs.
Great. And what are some of the other programs you mentioned? Couple more at the Institute?
Yes. So the second program that is happening at the Institute is an early intervention center called the ComDeal. This is an evidence-based early intervention program that was started by Dr. Pratibha Karand, and it is running successfully in various parts of the country. And their data shows that nearly 75 to 80% of children who are part of this program get an opportunity to enter the mainstream schools, which I think is a really encouraging statistic.
Wonderful. No, that's a really kudos to ComDeal. And I hear they're extending their partnership at Turkey. So let's keep up the good work of early intervention for sure. And you also mentioned on the parent training program, right? At the Institute?
So the third program that I'd like to talk about that's happening at Dr. Chandrasekhar Institute is the Mothers Training Program. And this specifically caters to children with hearing impairment and their mothers. So this is a holistic approach where they aim towards helping with their communication, their education, reading, writing, and life skills. And mothers are empowered to work with these children both at the center and at home. And they have, encouraging statistics as well. So 90% of children, who come out of the MTC programs, they get opportunities to be mainstreamed. And we've got success stories where they've been employed with great companies.
Oh, this is really heartwarming to hear. What was the other program at Bangalore that you mentioned?
Yes, APD is the other program that I would like to talk about. That is the Association of Persons with Disabilities. They follow a life cycle approach. And they provide not just early intervention, but inclusive education, vocational training. And they also cater to providing employment opportunities to young adults.
Great. I'm so delighted to hear that there is a holistic approach and where you're focusing on early intervention, parent training, taking the services out to the community, and then looking at employment. So what does that look like for children with special needs or adults with special needs when it comes to employment, Sarika, right now?
Yes, there's a change that we're noticing because of the efforts of the government and also of the private companies. So a lot of private companies now are open to taking persons with special needs as employees, and they make special provisions to make it an inclusive working environment.
Great. I think we could continue talking a lot because this is an area of interest for both of us, but we ended with some resources today. And these are, different, the speech institute that Sarika works at. If you click on that website, you'll find out more about the academic as well as the training programs there. The other resources also just give you a highlight on the various aspects of slides that you already saw. And TalkSped from me has various videos on different aspects of communication, especially for children and adults with special needs. I started only a year ago, so there are not too many videos, but if you want something for me to cover, I'll be more than happy to engage with me on conversation and increasing disability awareness in the global community. Thank you, Sarika.
Thank you, Nami, for having me.
So thank you so much for listening to our interviews. We hope you got a lot out of the presenters' perspectives from the different countries. We have certainly enjoyed our partnerships with them and learning more. And these are only two of our partners. We have had partnerships with educators in the UK, in Italy, and Vietnam, and continue to reach out to find out more about how we can help each other on a global scale. And Namita, do you want to talk about opportunities to overcome barriers?
Sure. Thank you, Rose. Yes, and I hope you enjoyed our conversations with our global partners that you heard today. One of the biggest, as you hear from them, that there are many challenges, and the work of increasing awareness and raising that bar of what it means to work with special education children and community, how to bring them together, and has been very interesting. So I quickly want to share a story that through my work with the TalkSped, I have an opportunity to talk with many providers all over the globe. There was a mom who lived in a very small island. It's called the Faroese Island. And she reached out to me and shared her story about her son lost language. He was diagnosed with autism later at the age of, at a very young age, had a very full vocabulary, high language when he was very young, and then lost the language skill. It was heartbreaking for her, and she really wanted to help and support his language skills. She traveled all the way from Faroese Island. You'll have to look it up if you don't know where it is, because it's near the Scandinavian countries, a very small island where they speak Faroese. She worked with app developers across in India and converted an app which is called Avaz. It was a year-long process and a journey for her to do that. And today that app is available, Avaz is available not just in Faroese, but in 9 other languages. And the story of mom, you can look it up at TalkSped, more details, but she had this language, worked with her child, and today many people in Faroese Island are using this app and are being able to have language for the children and give an opportunity to have an inclusive environment in the language and culture that they want. So it's so powerful when people take those extra steps, when they are willing to, overcome all the challenges and barriers that you've heard today, and then also be persistent and resilient in trying to create inclusive opportunities. It is a pleasure to hear from everybody how they're doing this work all around the globe. And we hope that today you got an opportunity to hear some of this. Another speech language pathologist I interviewed in India has come up with a literacy development in Hindi. And she puts on videos where she attends and talks about literacy development of Phono Easy. So these are just a few people who have interacted and shared what they're doing to support inclusive work and around the globe. I hope that some of it, stays with you and you can use these resources and understand better how it helps globally. The resources, like we shared in our slides, include, the slides are there, but also you have more information on the Institute website and the Indian, the government work that they're doing. Also the Facebook page and the TalkSped with YouTube channel. It's just my effort during the pandemic to raise awareness, disability awareness was the sole purpose. I have a few videos and you can check it out if that interests you. Thank you so much for your time today.
So in addition, on our last slide here, we have a copy of that bellwether report regarding marginalized students, and then the full teachers gallery PowerPoint on their inclusion campaign. And then our email addresses. We've also included our email addresses there in Santa Clara Unified for myself, Rose Dumont, and Namina Monder. We hope you've had a great conference so far, and do it all for inclusion. Thanks, everyone.